Good morning, Warren. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm so glad we get a chance to connect in the podcast today. I say this on my podcast a lot, but one of the things that's fun about this is sometimes I interview people I've known for almost my whole life, and other times I've interviewed people that I've met 2 minutes ago. This is we met about 10 minutes ago. So Warren and I don't know each other at all. So everything we're going to be talking about today is brand new for both of us, which is really, really fun. And I'm really glad you decided to come on, and I can't wait to hear more about what we're going to talk about today. So Warren, with that, I'd love if you'd introduce yourself to the audience, where you are in the world, and just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks. Hopefully by the end of the hour, we'll feel like we've known each other forever.
Oh, that'll be the sign of a good episode.
Well, I'm not young, and I have been sort of in business for almost 40 years now. And I started my career in Brooklyn, New York, which we were talking about a little bit before, as a working in a department store called Abraham and Straus. But basically, over the years, I've started my own business, 9 of my own businesses, and for the last 25 years, I've been helping inventors. And I've been helping in a variety of ways. I had a product that I helped launch called MISTO, M-I-S-T-O, in the late 90s. It was an olive oil sprayer, sort of an alternative to PAM, all natural. We sold millions of them. And
we had one of those.
Sort of changed my whole life.
We've had MISTO. I think we still have a MISTO. It's great.
Well, the first ones were made in the Inventors garage, and I sold the first ones, and we partnered up. And I've had a career now of helping inventors in a variety of ways. I've helped launch products, some of them really, really successful, like MISTO, 1 or 2 real clunkers that cost me a lot of money. And basically also got involved in the nonprofit inventor arena and world by eventually becoming president of the largest 501c3 inventor nonprofit. But I now morphed my business into helping companies and being their open innovation director. In fact, my meeting before and my meeting after this are on products that I brought to large companies. And I helped the largest housewares company in the US, for instance, Lifetime Brands, find products. And I've done over 100 licensing deals that have generated over $1 billion in retail sales. So I'm pretty good at it, but I'm also very cognizant of inventors, what their needs are, their limited resources, and in every way try to help them.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this because I am not an inventor. I would say I'm a vision person, and I like vision things, but I'm not somebody who's like, oh, let me build this. I'll never be the person who comes up with a product out of nowhere. I watch Shark Tank, and I watch these people, and I'm like, how did you come up with that? I think they're solving problems that they had. Most of the time, they're solving a problem that they had for themselves. And I'm like, oh wait, if it's a problem for me, it's probably a problem for the guy next door, and the next thing you know, yeah.
That's exactly right. And you and I are a lot alike, because I've been involved in developing and inventing, but I'm not particularly good at it. I'm not an engineer, and I am more like you. I consider myself more of, and a visionary, I think, is anyone that's looking forward, and trying to anticipate the future. So that's what I'm also good at. And I'm good at taking, I always had a skill as a buyer of finding new products and figuring out which ones to launch. Of course, there's always a risk involved. But I feel the same as you, that I'm a baseball player, couldn't hit the curveball, but I went on to become the general manager of a team, So
there you go. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, Warren, I can't wait to have this conversation. I am going to personally learn a ton, which is always fun for me. So let's get right into it. Let's start with talking about something that you nerd out about. So what is something that you nerd out about?
Well, money.
I feel you there. I'm the same.
I guess we'll segue this into a lesson, because your questions are a little different than I usually am asked, and I'm really enjoying them. But I try to think.
I've heard that from other people. Yeah, they're like, this is not what I'm used to, and I'm like, yeah, because they're not just about what you do; they're actually about like you as a whole person.
Well, that's great, because you're coming from another angle. But to the extent that I'm pretty loose and personable, and I love to get along socially with folks. But when it comes to money, I spent a lot of time, on details and projecting, and I learned that in business. I've had 9 of my own businesses, so you learn how to and as you get a little older, you'll see, you start to plan for retirement and other things. It all becomes important. So why is that important to inventors? Because a lot of them don't watch their money.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
So they may be engineers. They may have a lot of great ideas, but a lot of times they blow their money. And that's one thing I try to address in the book is be nerdy about counting what I call every shekel, right? I watch your shekels. I have a section on that. So
what's
and if you're going to spend money, make sure that you ask the right questions, you do it the right way, and don't spend all your money on one thing, because you won't have the resources to really get that product to market.
Yeah. For people out there listening that are inventors or thinking about inventing something, what's the number one waste of money that you see inventors spending money on when they first start out?
Well, I think there's a tie for first place.
Perfect. Perfect. I like that.
First of all, a lot of them, without vetting the marketplace properly and getting feedback, you described before, someone who solves a problem, they might have the problem. Is the problem big enough for enough people to make it a financial success? You may be the only person in the world that has that problem, in which case it's not going to relate to other people. Yeah. So, and what they do is they tend to, jump right into it, start building products, start have 1,000 of them in their garage. They start trying to sell them. And believe me, I made these mistakes, so I'm not laughing about it. My biggest failure, I got out way in front of the product on a more mass level with more money. So it was the same core issue. Yeah. And so that's one of the things. The second thing is there's a lot of people that help inventors, either individuals or companies or entities, and they are in the inventor help business. Be very careful and wary about them asking for money up front. A lot of them don't deliver on their promises, and the odds for success are very low, no matter what they say. And trust me, it's America. They're very good at explaining to you why they're necessary.
I've seen those late night commercials.
There's late night commercials, but actually those companies, in a way, they actually publish their success numbers, and you can actually see for yourself, because they have to abide by certain laws. But there's all types of people. I tend to like working with individuals a lot who are one-offs, because you usually trust them. But I go into depth about questions. Ask people. It's no different if you were a musician. Just think if you were thought you were a great guitar player, and you're not heading straight to Woodstock, right? You're gonna have to work your way up through the ranks, and then you have somebody say, "Hey, I can coach you." And you're going to make millions, and you just, not everybody has that type of talent. So just be sure to ask them, who have you coached in the past? Who have you helped in the past? What are your success numbers? What are your rates? Try to get a better idea. Just try to have an awareness about you. And that's part of my book, the confidential part of the book of what really goes on.
Yeah, that's good to know. If I ever do suddenly have the inspiration, I will be calling you first, because I'm probably the person who would make the mistake and be like, who do I hire to help me with this? And then it'd be like, wait, that didn't work.
One of my things is, one of my claims to fame, I don't charge inventors. So my early successes, I partnered with inventors on the back end, so I got a percentage after they sold. So if they didn't sell, I wouldn't have gotten anything. And then I now help companies, and they pay me. Magically, money goes into my account, and so I don't have to worry about that part of it, which is wonderful, especially as you get a little older. You get more financially secure, and that helps you think a little more clearly sometimes.
Yeah. Very cool. That's well, thanks for kicking it off with that. So I want to talk for a few minutes, or I actually want to ask you this about speaking. And so you have a platform, you're an author, you have a lot of business experience. My guess is that you've done some speaking, or you're on a podcast, you're a speaker, right? If you're on a podcast, you're a speaker. So if I give you 5 minutes, if I give you 5 minutes and you can speak on anything you want, you have 5 minutes, like your 5-minute TED Talk. What is it you'd want to talk about, and what is your call to action for the audience at the end of that speech?
Well, I would definitely make the core of the speech about innovation in America. Now, there's a lot of things a lot of currents going on in America, and I love America. By the way, I've lived overseas a lot. I grew up in Europe. I lived in Africa, and I've seen America from the inside and the outside. So I think I have a particular view of it. There's many wonderful things about America and many challenges that we have. Obviously, today, we have the economy, we have the virus, we have racism, we have all types of issues, and they're all important, and they're all part of our daily routine. The one area that I have some expertise, though, is innovation. And how does that relate to all of those other currents that are going on? Well, number one, I feel that innovation is a core tenet of America, and it goes back to 1792 when the country was formed, and the Patent Office was the first building built in Washington, D.C. after the White House.
Really?
And George Washington, our first president. Yeah.
I had no idea. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, they from day one, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, one thing they could all agree on, and by the way, they fought as much as we do today, was
Sure.
was to get the country off the ground economically, that we had to reward inventors and innovation. And Thomas Jefferson was the first patent office commissioner, and Alexander Hamilton was all over it too. And what it's grown out today is probably the most vibrant patent system in the world. And patents, why are they important? Because they're the intellectual property that takes an idea, allows you to mechanically, draw it out, and then it becomes through the right review, a physical property, no different than your house or your car, and
Sure.
you own that. So now, why is that important? Well, first of all, no one can steal it. Okay. Supposedly, and you should be able to license it to bigger entities, who may covet your property. So there's value to it, and that's allowed individuals. That's given a voice to individuals. And why is that important? Because we all know that big companies, once they get successful, they tend to pull up the ladder and they stop innovating. I mean, look at this classic example is Kodak cameras. They dominated the world camera market. They actually invented the digital camera, and then they shelved it because at some board meeting, they thought that it was going to affect their film margins, right? I'll bet. So some brainiac up there didn't have a vision, the vision you talked about before. So what innovation is sort of in our DNA. We've always been the most innovative country on the planet. It's driven our economy, which is the backbone for all the things that happen. So two things about that today. Number one, I want to make sure the innovation ecosystem is accepting of all people, no matter, you don't have to be an old white male, rich male to participate. You should be minorities, women, rural folks, military, everybody. I serve on several commissions that help that, and pro bono commissions that do that. So I'm very, very impassioned about that. And number two, I write about it a lot in the book. Big tech companies, I'm not blaming them per se, but their self-interest as an organizations are not in the same things that small inventors are, even though they were started not too long ago by individual, entrepreneurs. Sure. And they had patents that helped develop their company and sell their platform and raise capital. But today they want to change the patent laws, and they have changed the patent laws, and they have tremendous influence in lobbying. So what I would like to say in my speech, as I end 5 minutes, is innovation is important. It can segue into all the other issues that we have going on today. And let's give a little bit more attention to it.
Nice. What is your favorite invention in the last few years off the top of your head? Like, what's the thing that you're like, oh man, that's brilliant?
Well, I'll tell you what, to me, I love these questions because they're coming out, but I love answering them. I love Kickstarter. I love the crowdfunding platform.
Totally.
Okay.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I know that it's a little bit more than an invention. It's a platform, but I every time and I'm very critical of new stuff, and I'm doing it wrong. And I think it's been wonderful, and it's captured the imagination, especially of younger folks. A lot of older folks still don't get it yet, but they get. And I know when I was starting my businesses years ago, it was very hard to raise capital. I didn't have any collateral. I had no net worth in life and all this, and it allows you to go out and form with the community. So I tip my cap to them, and a big supporter of that.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter too. I have a friend who's a filmmaker, and he raised like 20 grand to get this really awesome documentary made. It's just a really cool way and it's a fun way to get people involved in things they care about, or either that they think they'll use, or that like friends, family, films made. I love Kickstarter and GoFundMe. I think it's such a brilliant model. It gets people feeling like and it's a community, right? You get to be a part of something.
Yeah. And visionary people that take a chance on new products, get to look at it and see things that they wouldn't see at the store. And get it, and they're the first ones to get it for their influencers, and then just the whole idea of some people sometimes really hit it big, and I comb it all the time, and I'm always looking for new products there.
Oh, very cool. Thanks, Warren. I love that speech. I worked just by way of background. We'll talk a little bit more about this. I worked in tech my whole career until 3 years ago, and I started doing my own thing. So I worked in companies that were always innovating or maybe not so innovating. So that totally resonates for me on the tech side and software and such, where you're like, hey, this isn't really what people want anymore. And then as you were talking about this, I do consulting work for like software companies, small software companies, generally like Series A, Series B, or even angel. And I did some work with a company, and they had this really nice product and no market for it. So I'd ask them, I said, like, well, who are you selling this to? And they'd be like, well, it's for these people. And then we go out and talk to these people and be like, we don't need this. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, so
yeah, that's
it's
a
real
big problem. That's a problem a lot of people make. And of course we have that, I talk a little bit in the book about tech transfer. So you might want to look for other arenas where your technology might be appropriate, because sometimes there's different areas out there. But but your world of tech, and I'm a little bit more into consumer products.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the problems where the debate has come. The tech companies have a lot more cloud and power today, and they see things from a tech point of view. And surely IP, when it comes to software, and it's a little bit more nebulous. There's been some pretty weird Supreme Court rulings on it. I don't think people get it. I don't think they understand it. Especially older folks. But I'm continuing to fight. I'm hoping someday we can find a middle road between continuing innovation for the next generation and at the same time allowing tech companies to prosper.
Awesome. Thanks, Warren. Well, we're going to take a really brief commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Warren, we're back. So I'm really excited about this part of the show to hear about your journey, because you kind of give us a sneak preview at the beginning of the episode. You've had a long storied career. And by the way, you all don't see Warren. He's not that old. You call yourself old. I think you're being humble. But you said, so you started in the business world and you worked in retail, and now you've been doing your own thing for quite a while. So this is the part of the show where I'd love to just hear anything you want to share with me and with the audience about your journey, and including any lessons that you learned along the way that the audience can pick up on. And, as somebody who's been through the ringer and especially the industry you're in, I'm sure that you've seen all sorts of things. Like what can you teach us here? This is your teaching moment, and also share your story moment.
Well, listen, I appreciate the comment, and I do stay very active, and I've always sort of lived life on the edge a little bit. And I guess the what I did was when I after I worked at Abraham and Strauss, a department store in New York City, in Brooklyn actually for many years, and got a base. I came out to Connecticut where I live today, and I started a number of gourmet stores. I had 6 kitchen hardware stores that were similar to like a Williams-Sonoma. But mind you, Jason, this was back in the 80s before they existed. I mean, today they're pretty commonplace. But at the time, it was pretty cutting edge. And I also had a food store called The Good Food Store, where we did prepared foods and catering. My partner in that business was Paul Newman, the iconic actor who you probably have heard of. I don't know if you've seen him.
Absolutely. Paul Newman. Of course, I've heard of Paul Newman. He was doing New Zone.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, sometimes like my daughter told me, my 26-year-old daughter told me the other day, Daddy, did you know that Arnold Palmer was a golfer? I guess she only thought it was a drink, a nice tea drink. But
Warren, I want to interrupt you for 1 second and prove to you, like, The Sting is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'll leave it at that.
Well, we did a lot of catering for Paul, and he would do parties he was very good friends with Robert Redford. So
I'm sure you could tell.
That was kind of cool.
That's cool.
Paul used to drink long neck Budweiser, so we'd always make sure we had cases upon cases of that in stock if he ever needed them. But he was a very, very kind man and very, very nice to me, and would call me like once I wouldn't say I was not friends with Paul Newman, but he would call me once a year and to see how I was doing, just to see how I was doing, and it was nice. And I remember one time coming back to the store, and one of my one of the ladies in the store taking the call, and she said, you have a few messages, and Tom Jones calling, and Paul Newman. And then she looked at me, she goes, was that Paul Newman that I was talking to? And she just melted like Paul Newman.
That's awesome.
But I had a cooking school. I had Julia Child do our cooking school and all. And I did for about 20 years. I learned really valuable lessons, Jason, on the ground in my own businesses. I had 65 employees. We did a lot of dollars per square foot, but I had a lot of challenges with rents, payrolls. I had $1 million payroll. I was young. I learned my lessons really, really well, but I would say to people that the retail business was very tough. First of all, it got overexpanded. I can't even imagine today with Amazon how tough that is. Yeah. So, and with the virus, it's just got to be killer to a lot of folks today. So So, but what I learned though on the ground was I really learned a lot of the lessons I learned in New York City. I learned them again. I learned how to select products. I learned how to source products, make them and all. And then one day when this inventor walked in the store and showed me MISTO, I was kind of born ready for that moment. I don't know that if I could have done what I did if I didn't have it 20 years before me. So my suggestion to young folks is life's organic, and I'm sure you're experiencing that too. You might jump into tech early on, or you might jump into writing or whatever you want to do, but your life keeps evolving. And I know right now I'm on a new mission now for the next 5 years with my friend Chan Kim, who wrote the book Blue Ocean Strategy. And I led to this through the writing of the book and getting to know him. And I'm going to drop kind of what I'm doing over the next year. And so, life, you just have new rides that come along, and be ready for that. And I was talking to someone this morning who was close to me, who I suggested that they talk to someone. And he said, I don't really need them right now because, I'm doing blah, 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 blah. And I said, listen, dude, you're thinking way too, literally, you need to expand. Life's organic. You talk to this guy, give him 20 minutes. He may not help you now, but he might help you down the road. So I would just say to people, be open to follow your dreams.
Yeah. Curious, Warren, are you, when you're making business decisions now, is it more of do you need a lot of data and analyzation, or for you, are you at the point where you're kind of more of a gut oriented business person? And of course there's always going to be a combination of both, but I'm curious where does your inner wisdom come from?
Yeah, tragically, I'm more gut oriented, and so when you get hit in the gut, it hurts,
Yeah.
But I'm more a feel person. I'm better at seeing the perils and things that I was once. But I haven't told you, I ride motorcycles. I've jumped on an airplane, and I do heli ski and stuff. So I'm a risk taker. So I tend by personality not to always know where the boundaries are. And I've gotten myself into trouble. And have to pull back, and I put my family at risk once, and it was just part of why I do that. So I'm more, but certainly, when it comes to money, as I said before, I'm pretty analytical about that. But as far as the opportunity, I really need to feel it in my gut, and then I test it, I plant it and test it. I try to keep other things going. I never leave my day job, and then if those things start to take root, at some point when they're starting to build momentum, and then I usually segue into the new thing. That's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, that's I bring this up because my wife and I we do some light investing and some things, and I'm somebody who I get really inspired by the vision of things. I'm not so much a data and details person. I'm more so for me, if I'm probably the good example of somebody when I see a cool product, like I'm an early adopter. Let's put it that way. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I'll spend more money for it. And I was thinking back again, on the show Shark Tank, you see a lot of a lot of inventors. And it kind of seems like most of the sharks, they're using their brain, but at some point they switch it off and they're like, it's my gut, especially Mark Cuban. He's like, I'm just not feeling it, I'm out. And I think that's, it's like an analysis by paralysis thing. I'm also with you. If you ever taken the Myers-Briggs, I'm a F, not a T. Yeah, so I'm a little bit more of a feeler. And I don't know if, for you, like you said that you tread when you get hit in the gut, but I also would assert that actually is a superpower because the thinking at some point in your brain, you can come up with the data, and everybody has access to certain things, but nobody has access to your intuition and your gut.
Yeah, no, we sound a lot alike, and I agree with that. I have two things in the book that might relate to that. One is I have a little part called "Sleep on It." I'm like you; I fall in love with every product. My imagination runs wild, and I think you need a little bit of that passion. Otherwise, you can't get up in the morning. But I like to sleep on it, and I want to make sure I feel the same way the next day. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, I know what you're talking about. I wish I'd followed that advice more. I don't always sleep on it. And then I'm like, oh wait, what did I do? What? No.
Yeah. You don't want to wake up in the morning and go, what was I thinking last night?
Yeah.
But anyway, we've all been through that. So I think that's a little bit about it. But I do think that with some experience, you can put things through its paces. Be patient. Things need to keep growing. Again, I get back to the organic planting of a seed. It starts out as a little plant and does it get bigger? And there's so many reasons along the way that things will collapse and fall apart. So you have to be very mindful of that. Although you're moving ahead, you're like a running back, running down the field, but you got to make sure that, nobody's coming on your flank to clean your clock,
Yeah.
And I do write a book about my biggest failure, which was a saucepan stirring device that I helped develop from scratch. And it was brilliant because I had taken a year off and I knew everything, and I was floating and had the dough to put into it. And from my cooking school, I knew that the most common given command in cooking was to stir, whether it's intermittently or occasionally,
Sure.
whether it's beans or pastas or polenta or risotto or anything. So I developed this phenomenal, saucepan stirring device. It folded up into the size of a coffee cup so you could put it in the drawer. It wouldn't take up counter space. It had a drop-down paddle that had living hinges so that it would, adjust any size pan. It had spring-loaded arms,
Wow.
And you could put it on the saucepan and walk away from it and do other things, It was absolutely brilliant. And we went to the Houseware show many years ago, and it was the #1 show in product in America. And I was on Good Morning America and Today's Show and all this stuff. And I was hyperventilating because I was going to make so much money. I didn't know which houses I was going to buy first, And the thing was a complete bomb. By the way, I had two versions of it. I had a $29.99 version that we sold for $12 to the companies that wanted high margins like Bed Bath and put that in a gold box. This very same product we put in a red box. We called it Easy Stir and sold it to Walmart for the same $12. They put it out for $19.99. I mean, the plan was absolutely technically brilliant. It was a Harvard Business School thing, and it bombed because high-end chefs don't do the stirring themselves. As someone told me once, they want to put the love into their stirring. And I said, well, geez, if you had one of these, you could be upstairs making real love. But anyway, nobody thought that was very funny. And the low end, like in microwaves and stuff, they don't stir. So nobody bought the damn thing except senior citizens and disabled people. And it wasn't a big enough market.
Yeah.
And I got my clock cleaned, but I will say this, I spent a year getting out of the problem, living in a warehouse, getting rid of it. But a lot of that was the lessons that I learned that have helped me to be able to, as you said, speak today. And I speak on these things a lot. So.
Yeah. Well, that's, I have one more question for you about this before we move on. What do you think? Well, let me make a statement first. If you went up to our kitchen right now or in this house, you would see quite a number of products that were bought from Instagram ads that would be considered early adopter products. For example, I'll give you an example. And I'm sharing this for a reason. My wife literally just got us a new nonstick pan that's beautiful. And she got an Instagram ad. And she's like, hey, we need a new one of these. And I think it was $29.99. It's beautiful. And I can point out various things around our house that we bought from Instagram ads. So I feel like social media is a really nice new way to target inventions because you can say, hey, Jason liked this pan and we know it's a new pan. He's probably going to be interested in this other thing. And I'm a tech buyer, so I have like multiple tech things I'm curious how you think the social media, be able to target people on social media has changed it for inventors, because it seems like it's a real boon for inventors now.
No question about it. And it's the world's much more accessible today than it was 20 years ago. Doing business with the big retailers is very tough. Walmart, Target, I mean, they have shipping manuals that are size of telephone books. Can we use telephone books? Anyway, huge books. Yeah. If you ship anything wrong, there's all types of penalties and fines with it. I mean, you could lose money in a heartbeat. You can now go directly to consumer. My niece, Sarah, started an amazing company called Olive in June. It's all B2C, and you can do it online. And the other great thing that the younger generation has brought up now is star ratings, and the importance of that. You can now look at that pan and your wife can say, hey, it has a 5-star rating. It's good for me. Or, I mean, if you get under 4 stars, you're done,
Totally.
So totally. So, and by the way, the classic DRTV companies, the ones I've helped for many years, that were on television ads, those late night ads, by the way, which are the successors to the Boardwalk guys in the 30s that were selling mops, who were the successors to the covered wagon people in the 1800s. They're all the same clan. They have now moved over to that space of social media, and so much more is digital and technical today. So it's all intertwined, and I think it's a great thing. And if you got the pan and you love it and you write something great, that's wonderful. Yeah. And if you don't, I think it warns others. So it gets back to community, and I think that's all good.
Yeah, I think the pan is good. I got instructions from my wife. Do not use anything metal in it. That was her specific thing. Like, do not put anything metal in this. Don't use the silverware. And I'm like, got it. Rubber or plastic.
Well, we've come a long way. We've come a long way in the nonstick world. So the technology is a lot better today. Much better. So.
Yeah. Last thing I'm going to say before we move on is, I love this topic. this brings back memories of, I grew up in Minnesota, and Minnesota has a really big state fair, really big. I think it's the fourth largest in the country. I don't know if you've been there.
Yes, many times.
Yeah. So, there's a ton of there's a whole coliseum filled of inventors. And I always remember growing up, I wanted to be the person who was like the barker, who was selling like the rags that would soak up triple the water, or, I remember my mom once bought like this. Yeah, it was like a salsa. It was like a salsa grinder. And I always thought that was so cool. And I had so much admiration for these people that would make this cool thing and then go out and spend 14 days like up all day, just like selling this thing over and over again. And like
some of those people make a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
And and there's state fairs all over the country. And they're pitchmen that you never see, but they're sort of the I know it's I don't want to get into politics today, but that's how Mike Lindell started with My Pillow at the state fair, the Minnesota State Fair.
Oh, so I'm not surprised.
I go out to Minnesota a lot, and been fishing. I've been all the way up to Brainerd to go fishing on the Mississippi.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, let's take a brief. I'll make this brief since this is all about you, but I do like to put this part of the episode in so that my guests can ask me something. So I'm reliable to talk for too long. I'm going to put myself on a timer of 3 minutes. So Warren, what would you like to ask me about?
Well, I'm fascinated. We're different generations, yet we're very similar. And so my question to you is you started in the tech world, which is fascinating to me, and you're evolving. What are you evolving into?
What am I evolving into? How I make money, or as a human?
Well, yeah, you're a visionary. You're looking forward to your next move. I mean, it's not all about money, but money's important. Sure. It's money, lifestyle, and where do you see yourself when you're my age?
Yeah. On my sailboat coaching people. Is that a good answer? I have this in the Caribbean, sailboat in the Caribbean.
All right. Okay.
No,
I found let me get some context to it. I found it's not enough to just go sailing. Okay. You want to do something. So it's the other part. You can do it from your sailboat. That's fine.
Yeah.
But what do you want to do?
I think what I would like to do is, I'd like to run a company with my wife, which we're in process on that now. It's pre-launch, so I'm not going to share what it is quite yet. I'd like to run a company. I would like to invest. I'd like to find either, like you said, like nonprofits or inventors, or I'd like to invest with small, like do angel invest. I'd like to have enough capital that I can afford to lose some money if I need to, because it's a high, obviously as well, it's a high risk, high reward type of thing. And then I would like to be able to work from anywhere.
All right.
We have two young kids. So like we've got a long road of school and stuff ahead of us, but and we have a 5-month-old. So when I say young kids, we have a very young kid. But it would be like my wife and I to be able to pick up and say, hey, we've got this business we're running. Let's go to the Caribbean and run it from there. Or, hey, like we have a friend, or hey, I know this really great guy, Warren, he's got this new business opportunity. Let's go talk to him and see if maybe this is something we want to get involved in. I'd like to have the financial freedom and the time freedom and the location freedom to be able to just go do that. And you said it, travel. Like my wife and I are both huge fans of traveling. And with 2 young kids in a pandemic, that has not been a thing for a year now. So we're definitely claustrophobic. So that's what I'd like to do. Is you and I are very similar. I'd like to have my hand in multiple things. I'm never going to be the guy who wants to just like do the one thing, which is why I work for myself, because I don't like the idea of like, here's your laptop, here's your job description, go do this thing. I like the paycheck that comes with that.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, I was like, okay, I need to go and do my own thing. So that's what I would like to do.
If I was your therapist, I would say this. I would say, you sound like you want to help others. And that's kind of what I want to do. And that's kind of what I'm still evolving into, because it never changes. And you help people in different ways. And
that's right.
And that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book to help others, really. I didn't write it for money.
Yeah.
I don't plan on making any money, but if someone can read it, take a lesson out of it. And I think that's where you're headed to, bro. So,
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah. It's, I'm also somebody, I think you and I are like in that, I'm not attached to how it has to go. I like the ride. I like the ride and to see what I can create in the moment. I don't need to have I don't know. I just find that like, what's your 20-year plan? I'm like, 20 years. I have no idea.
To be alive. Mine's to be alive.
Anyway, to be alive and be doing something that I enjoy and have good friends and family around me. I'm probably and have enough money to pay the bills, and I'll probably be happy. All right. Great question. Really great question. Thanks so much for that, Warren. What do you, back to you, what are you passionate about?
Just to segue nicely, I'm passionate about life. I love engaging, and sometimes I see people that are down, maybe they've lost their job. I always sort of chuckle because I haven't had a job in 40 years, it's three-dimensional if you're in your own business some days. I don't think about jobs or money, but it's engagement. Whatever it is that you feel is important to you, engage, get out there, make a difference. For me, I didn't have enough capital or wealth. I didn't come from, wealthy family. I just didn't, have the means necessary to change the world, like in my housewares world, for instance. So what I decided when I had my own stores that I didn't like it, that I would insert myself helping companies launch new products, and then eventually with Inventors and now in open innovation programs, that I could put myself inside of large companies and I could convince the managers of the large companies to do things and in my own way change the world that way. So figure out what your path is and how you can do it, engage and make a difference.
How do I'm sure we have listeners out there that don't know their path, or they're on a path that they know is not for them and they don't know what's next. Any advice there?
Well, I have a chapter in the book called SIAM. You might enjoy this. SIAM is an acronym that I made up called Stop, Identify, Address, and Move On. Because I had a lot of anxiety when I was a kid. We all do, when we have young children and there's fear, risks, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah. And
so it's especially important to me after failure too, which is, it's stop living in fear, try to address your fears, and your anxieties. And what I do is when I come into something that's very challenging or causes me great stress, or my anxiety meter goes off and I'm starting to freak out, I stop. Sometimes I just look up at the sun and close my eyes and try to take a deep breath, think of a happy thought, like when I'm skiing, or do something just to stop the clock, And then what's the most important part is identify really what the problem is. When I lost all that money as Stir Chef, I had to identify what went wrong. What can I learn? After you go through these stages of fright, fear, and, total rejection and depression, to how do you rebuild, and get back on the saddle, identify what's not sometimes the obvious, but the unobvious. You'll know, it'll click in your mind when you settle on it. And then you have to address those issues. You got to become better at it. You gotta want it. You can't, if you're just happy going in 9 to 5 and working in a cubicle and you're fearful of everything else, you're never going to get outside that lane. And then eventually you got to get back on the saddle and move on like it never happened, and learn from it. So I have a whole chapter in that about addressing that. And that's, it's my favorite chapter in the book.
Yeah, that's cool. We're going to talk about the book in a couple minutes as we start to wrap up. As an executive coach, this is something that everybody struggles with. One of the things that I'll always ask is, so Warren, is that a fact or an interpretation? My God, I had the worst day today. Is that a fact or an interpretation? Well, and what I said,
that's a great question.
Yeah. And what I mean by that is, like, it's a little tongue in cheek, but also, if you can step out of the interpretations you have about something and look at the facts, like the facts is what Stir Chef was the name of the product.
Yep. Yes.
The fact is you lost money. The interpretation is what you make that mean about you. So yeah. And we all do this as a parent. This is like kind of 101. Like, my kid's behaving badly, and so that means I'm a bad parent. Or so what are the facts or the interpretations? It's not a perfect fix, and it's something that your brain doesn't like. Your brain doesn't like to think about the facts. Your brain works best with interpretations, because that's what brains do.
It's very similar to what you asked before about gut and data. And you're living in that middle ground. I call it, I have a place that I love. It's called the beach, right? What is?
I love that place too.
Yeah. And what is the beach actually? It's a place. It's a very thin strip of land or plate. It's a very thin strip between the ocean and the land, right? So when you ask questions like that, gut or data or factor, you're living on the beach there. And these are things that you have to make decisions. But once you make your decision, you kind of have to go with it. You got to move on, and you got to, if it's the wrong decision, there's time. You can get off, reconcile, come back and do it right. But, at some point you got to make that decision and do it. And I find so many people, don't make the decision, but it doesn't mean don't make the decision poorly. and ask the right questions and put yourself through I take a lot of risks. I've signed waivers, on heli ski trips that if you die, it's not their fault,
Yeah.
But I want to know where I land. I do all the research. I ran with the bulls in Pamplona. I walked the course the night before. I want to know every curve. And when the bulls ran by me, I knew exactly where I was.
Yeah.
So do your research, and before you take the risk, do your research. But then go do it, and see how it works. The worst thing that can happen is you fail and you come back.
Yeah. That's awesome. I have one last question for you before we talk a little bit more about the book. So, what is the thing that you're most proud of in your life?
I would say being a father, and father to 3 young women. I grew up as one of 4 boys. We are now a little older, but we still behave the same way when we're together, pretty much punching and mocking each other. I grew up in a male-dominated household. I didn't talk to a girl that I was 17. I have now become the world's biggest fan of women and what they bring to the table in my businesses, in my life. My daughters now are 26 to 32. One's getting a PhD, one's gone to law school and works for a big finance company. And one lives in New York City. And they've all are engaging in the world in a wonderful way. It's a great time to be a woman. My wife is an extremely successful woman. She worked for People magazine for years and years. And she's just, and I'm just totally into that whole opening up the world to a new way of looking at things. And I think I'm probably proudest of being able to adapt and be there for my daughters and have wonderful relationships with them. And I hope the same is true for you someday, Jason.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Warren. I said we have a 5-month-old son. We have a 5-year-old daughter. So I'm also oldest. I have a daughter. And it was funny. It's funny. I don't know if I grew up with a brother and a sister. But most of my life, I was like an athlete, kind of like jock, alpha male. And then then I worked in tech sales. So I was surrounded by people just like me for the most part, male, white, New York City. And it's funny, since I've made my career shift, the coaching industry is heavily dominated by women. So I am around women in almost every area of my life. I coach more women. I'm married to a woman, I have a daughter. So it's really funny too, that I've had this really fascinating shift from like my corporate sales career with kind of people that are just like me into like, whoa. And it's so much power in both of it. There's so much more to offer.
It's a whole new learning line. And I'm the same as you. I was a jock. I was a lacrosse player in college, and I grew up playing all types of varsity sports. But I lived in a locker room, and it's the same thing. So it's eerie how similar some of the things.
Well, maybe in a few
your
years
daughter will amaze you.
Yeah, no, she already amazes me. She will. Me.
And by the way, I hate to tell you this, Jason, but she's already smarter than you at 5. You just don't know it yet.
Oh, no, I do know. I think I do know it at this point. She said some stuff. I'm like, how do you know that? She's just a personal thing with my daughter. She's very, very feminine. And I'm like, okay, what's the one thing her and I could do together that maybe isn't so much? And so we've been watching The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, the Star Wars show, and she is obsessed with it. And I'm so happy because my wife could care less. So it's now our new thing. And it's not a boy or girl thing, but it's, a little more masculine thing. But to your point about being smarter, I'll ask her, be like, what'd you think of that episode? And she remembers all the details. And I'm like, I didn't remember that happening. She's like, yeah, in this part, this person did this thing. I'm like, you're 5 and you know more. She definitely has a better memory than I do at this point. That's awesome. Well, congratulations on, the family and, everything your families do. That's really great. And that's it's funny. This question, anybody who comes on here who's a parent, it's 99% of the time is something to do with parenting. Anybody who's not a parent, it can be anything. So it's like, for those of you who aren't parents who are considering it, you could probably take a lesson from that. All right. So Warren, let's spend a couple minutes. We haven't talked a lot about the book. You've been weaving it in throughout, but I'd love to take a few minutes to let you share about the book, where people can find it, who it'd be good for, and all that good stuff.
Yep. Well, thank you. So the book is available. It launches March 23rd. I'm not sure when we'll air, but if it's after March 23rd, it will be available on Amazon. I also have a website called inventorconfidential.com. And so you can find it there. The book has amazing endorsements from friends and influencers. The president of Home Depot is a person I know well and endorsed it. Chan Kim, I don't know if you're, Jason, are familiar with the book Blue Ocean Strategy, but it's one of the best-selling business books in the history of the world. Chan's a professor at INSEAD and the number one business consultant in the world. And I met, it's another show for how I met all these people. But having said that, I have 18 amazing endorsements on the book. The first half of the book is very dedicated to product development, how to do things the right way, no shortcuts, learn your lessons. If you want to be a good football player, you got to learn how to block and tackle. There's just no way around it. I'm sorry.
Yep.
But the second half of the book is things to be aware of. I do get into this crowdfunding. I do get into social media. I do get into a lot of things that people can do to help themselves, trade shows, all types of cool stuff. And then I get into organic innovation, which we talked about a little bit. And then the last chapter, I pretty much tell everybody what they can do to make innovation better in America, more accessible, and keep us. And I don't spare anyone. I go after Congress, the Patent Office, the Supreme Court, Google, everybody, you know.
I love it.
So hopefully no one takes it personally, but we can all do better. And I want to just bring this whole consciousness up about innovation in our country. So
yeah,
thank you for giving me this platform.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Thanks for being on. I have a great admiration for authors specifically because I hate writing. So my friend is like, you should write a book. I'm like, that sounds no. Like I'll do a podcast, I'll do improv, I'll speak, but so I have a great admiration for people that write books. And
well, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a tremendous amount of work. I have a guy that helped me, like a lot of people do. I wrote, every word of it, but he was so helpful. He was the one that pushed me to write it. He's an inventor himself, and he kept saying, "You got to get the word out there." And I said, "I don't have time." I'm like you. I don't have time. I don't have.
Yeah.
But it's a real commitment. It's someone asked me, how long did it take? And I said, it's like I don't know if you've renovated your kitchen yet. But if you haven't, when you go to do it, I promise you, we'll talk about it later, but it'll cost you twice as much and take twice as long.
Yeah.
So the book took twice as long as I thought. So, but it was, in a lot of ways, it was cool. Now it's just getting out there. People are starting to read it and endorse it. And I'm like, it's kind of weird now because now I'm going to be, people are going to judge it. But it was a lot of fun writing it. At the end of the day, I didn't write it. I wrote it more to help people, and as we said before. So
yeah, I want to give you a quick plug too. I haven't read the book yet. It's obviously not out yet, but because we're recording this on March 12th, I have another friend, former colleague who was on the show a few weeks ago. She wrote a book. It's called The Hollywood Approach. It's about how to she's a Hollywood screenwriter, so she's got this really fun approach. The plug I want to give you is if you go give Warren a 5-star review on Amazon. She's like, that is the thing. When you hit 100 5-star reviews, that kicks off the algorithm, and you start to just show up more on Amazon, which is kind of how you build your book now, from what I understand. All right, Warren, last thing. Love if you would leave us with some very short words of wisdom. So on a Post-it note, what do you got for us?
It's so funny to say Post-it note because I wrote my book on Post-it notes. They were just 2 feet by 3 feet ones, and I put them around the living room, and I stood in the middle because I couldn't write it at the desk, so I had to be in the middle of everything. But you had asked that question before, and I like to say this: it's the same advice I gave to my children, and maybe Jason, you can give to yours someday.
Yes.
And it's look at the horizon, and you'll know where to go. And what I mean by that is people who are just looking at your feet and slogging through the mud and everyday life and the cracks in the sidewalk. You're not seeing the big picture. Point yourself in some direction, because once you get the inspiration and like your vision, you'll get there. You will get through the mud and the cracks, and you'll make it happen. But you got to have a little bit of vision, and so I'm sure you can appreciate and relate to that. Look at the horizon; you'll know where to go.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Warren. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on all the things you're up to. I can't wait to stay in touch with you and have you back on here in a year to talk about how it's gone and all those things. So, last thing for the audience, I'll put the link to the book. We'll be releasing this right around when the book launches. So I'll put the link to the book. We'll also put your website in there and all the places you can connect with Warren. And the last thing I'll say is my guess is if there's somebody out there who's an inventor or thinks you could help them, you would love to hear from them. Like email,
Absolutely.
LinkedIn.
So go on the website, inventorconfidential.com, or you can email me at wtuttle@yahoo.com. I may be a day or two, but I'll always get back to you. And hopefully, Jason, you and I can go to a concert one day up at Bethel Woods.
Oh my God. Yes. You got to let me know when you're up here. We were just sharing, last thing is Warren was at was only 15 minutes from where we live. And it's by this really amazing concert venue called Bethel Woods. And my whole family's a huge music family. And there's some concerts this summer. I saw Steely Dan and Steve Winwood.
They're starting to pick things back up, but they had the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. And for those that don't know, it's the site of Woodstock, which is very meaningful for me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Very nice, Warren. Well, I will let you go today. So glad I got a chance to connect. Thank you so much for being on, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.